everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Pallas. For this week's show, we are talking about permaculture and the Golden Rule, as well as theological musings with an author of both subjects, Neighbor Cruz. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question, unless you want to remain anonymous. Let's give a shout out to our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much. I love you all, and I really appreciate your support. If you would like to support the show, you can support it by going to sherrypallas.com. Literally, you will find dozens of ways of supporting me and the show for as little as $3 a month. Thank you in advance, and thank you for welcoming us into your home and joining the conversation. I appreciate you all. Okay, let's meet our guest and get smarter. Neighbor Cruz has a BA in history and a MA in religion. He is a certified permaculture designer and teacher. Dylan is the author of Go Golden, an exploration of the Golden Rule and permaculture, and the recently released Theological Musings Volume 1. He lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Dylan. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. I can't wait to hear about all of this. I see that when I see the Golden Rule and anything that I can implement in my life as far as doing better by the planet and doing better by all of us, I'm in. So
excellent.
Let's first talk about what is permaculture.
Okay, permaculture is a system of ecological and sustainable design that's utilized by designers to create cultivated ecosystems to provide for the needs of human beings, while also fostering all of the other biodiversity that of life on Earth. And it's typically seen as a regenerative agricultural practice, but it's also utilized in designing social systems. And I've even had mentors and teachers that have gone on into whole-scale city design.
Oh, wow.
And the idea is to work with nature rather than against it, because the originators, Bill Mollison and wow, my brain just went stupid.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, David Holmgren. Yeah, David Holmgren. Nearly senior moment there. They looked at ecosystems and they were like, we could design systems like this that were agriculturally productive. So Mollison was in a forest and he was looking around and going, everything happens here without any human input. Mm-hmm. The nutrients cycle through the system. Everything gets broken down. Why don't we design our agricultural systems like this? So permaculture started off that way, and it has since kind of morphed into much more than just a landscape or agricultural design system, into, like I said, more social systems. But that part's not really my area. I'm more in the theory and landscape agricultural design part.
So I moved to California almost 2 years ago. Okay. And I've noticed that grass here is a rare commodity. In fact, only the uber wealthy and dead have lawns in California. Forest Lawn Cemetery, one of the biggest lawns probably ever. But I noticed that there are so many yards that are full of cactus, different types of cacti, flowers that don't need water. Is that what you're talking about?
That, in a sense, yes. But permaculturists would look at a design site, and they would look at all of the different patterns that are in that particular biological region. So which way is the wind coming from? what is the aspect? If there's a slope, is it a north-facing slope, a south-facing slope, east-west? Where's the wind? Where's the sun? Are there any kinds of detrimental things, what a permaculturist would call vectors, that are coming in? And how would those kinds of things be mitigated? So utilizing different flora that is better suited for a particular bioregion, like you're talking about in California, where I'm assuming Southern California, where water is pretty scarce.
Yeah.
Instead of forcing a lawn into a system that's not designed for it. I lived in El Paso many years ago when my wife and I lived on Fort Bliss, and they wanted you to have a lawn, and it's in El Paso. They get 8 inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
It was utterly absurd, and I didn't know a thing about permaculture at the time. But I kept trying to grow this lawn in officer housing, and it was a fool's errand.
Totally.
Because there's just not enough rain. And another thing that happens there, and probably happens in Southern California when there's a big rain event, is that there's a lot of flooding because there's no way to slow the water down. And a permaculture designer would see water as an energy source to catch and store. So you want to catch and store as much of the energy as possible. So in I think it was the 1940s, maybe some civilian conservation corps types put something called swales in the desert, in the desert southwest of the United States. And a swale is essentially a ditch that's dead level. So if you look at a topographical map, all those little squiggly lines, that would be what a swale would look like at that scale. And water would hit that and then just soak in because it's like a dead level ditch.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates an envelope of water under the ground where it's useful, instead of having it run off and create flooding the way it would if there was any deluge in El Paso. The streets would flood pretty quickly because it was all hard pan sand and really compacted soil. So there was no place for the water to go except for the streets, and they didn't have good drainage.
Yeah.
So that's one kind of thing. And while we're talking about the golden rule, permaculturists look for patterns, as I was saying before. So to design a site. So I wouldn't have the same design elements here at my house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, as you would have at your house in Southern California.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Right. Because there's different weather patterns, climates, soil types, all of that kind of thing. Well, spiritual pattern. The golden rule is a spiritual pattern found literally in everywhere. Major faith and ethical system. So Taoism or Confucianism, sometimes people say those are ethical systems. Well, that has the golden rule. Christianity and Judaism have the golden rule. Satanism has the golden rule. Mm-hmm. Even Buddhism. So, all of these faiths. So I, as a permaculture guy, I was thinking about that and going, wait a minute, that's a spiritual pattern. So what would it be like if we applied the ethics of permaculture and the golden rule? What would life look like? And as I explicate and go golden, well, it would look radically different. We wouldn't have a almost $900 billion defense budget, for example.
Exactly.
We would have universal health care for any human being that happened to be in the United States, whether they were a citizen or not. We would have an agricultural system that was more predicated on not only providing food for people, but also regenerating the systems that are necessary to create that food, instead of chemically soaking those systems or having runoff like topsoil. One of America's biggest exports is topsoil. And from a historical
chemicals for it.
Yeah, and the chemicals for it. So one of the biggest, historically speaking, empires have fallen when they have depleted their agricultural resources. And the United States and most other places where intensive chemical and genetically modified agriculture are going on, are doing that. And from that perspective, say genetically modified organisms, many of them, most of them are modified for one particular reason, and that's so that they can withstand being sprayed with Roundup, which we now know causes cancer. And when I was researching my book, I found out that they were finding Roundup in every kind of water that they could test. The U.S. Geological Survey, they found it in ponds, they found it in lakes, rivers, streams, and rain. So we would not have that because we're exporting that.
Yeah.
There's a hydrological cycle which cycles all of the water that's ever been made has been made. No more water will be made. And yet that water is being cycled with these agricultural chemicals, including Roundup. And we're sending that to different places because we are in a closed system in our biosphere. And it may take a long time for rain that falls here and then runs into the Susquehanna watershed and then into the Chesapeake Bay to end up somewhere on the other side of the planet. But if all the water's already been made and we're poisoning what little is usable, that's absolutely bonkers. And it's definitely not the golden rule, and it's definitely not loving our neighbors, because all the people globally are our neighbors, especially when we're exporting things like our topsoil or nitrates into the Gulf of Mexico, which cause algal blooms, which then ruin livelihoods for fishermen and shrimpers and all that kind of stuff.
And all the way down.
Yeah. I live close to the Chesapeake Bay. It's an amazing natural resource, something that permaculturists and ecologists would call natural capital, because it's an estuary, and estuaries come from an ecotone. Ecotones are where two different ecosystems meet. So you have fresh water from the Susquehanna River watershed meeting salt water from the Atlantic. So you get this tidal estuary. And these places are profoundly diverse in biology. So it creates all these different niches for life in these ecotones. Well, we're exporting agricultural chemicals down the river to that ecotone and destroying livelihoods and destroying biological life, because nobody wants to tell farmers here that they can't use agricultural chemicals, and they definitely don't want to tell industrial companies that they have to stop putting chemicals into the river.
These are the forever chemicals that the Biden administration is trying to ban right now?
Some of them are not necessarily forever chemicals, but the Susquehanna River, which is one of the oldest rivers on Earth, when all the continents were together as Pangaea, the Susquehanna River was already flowing.
Oh, wow.
It's billions of years old, and it's very sick. We have cankerous fish. The fishermen are pulling out fish with giant canker sores all over them, and different things like that. I wouldn't swim in there for love nor money because it's chemical soup. So some of them are just industrial chemicals. We have fracking in this state, remarkably, despite the fact all of the information that we have about how horrific that is for watersheds and the environment, we still have that. And fracking chemicals apparently get sprayed on roads during the wintertime because it melts ice and snow, but then it runs off into the watershed. It's crazy. And
you can't love your brother if they're being poisoned, and we do nothing about it. I mean, exactly. By the way, hey TJ, good to see you here tonight. Hey David, good night to you too. One of the reasons I love Costa Rica so much is because they embody the Pura Vida lifestyle, which is good love, good life, pure life. And I feel better every time I go there. I feel healthier. The food is not contaminated, all of that stuff. I think that what I'm getting from you right now is that permaculture is a way for especially the United States and the people within it to stop being such of a fucking virus on this country. Is that okay? Okay, I am fully on board then.
Well,
So it's saying to use what we have as opposed to destroying and making our own way.
well, if you work with nature rather than against it, you
Mm-hmm.
can't have 5,000 acres of Roundup soaked soybeans,
Right.
or you can't create products that don't biodegrade,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So that's one thing. But at its heart, permaculture is a systems thinking design system that brings in ecology and agriculture and biology. It's very multidisciplinary. And I know just enough about all of this stuff to be really dangerous to the establishment. So,
I
because
like that.
permaculture, as one of my teachers quipped, is a revolution disguised as organic gardening.
Ah, love it.
And if you think about it, the golden rule is revolutionary. And
Yeah.
and I'm a Christian theologian, but I'm very much heterodox versus orthodox, and I believe that right practice is much more important than right belief, because
Right. Same.
it's incredibly difficult to pin down right belief in a system of belief that has 45,000 global denominations and exactly zero
Right?
copies of original manuscripts.
Yeah.
But if we go with right practice, the golden rule is revolutionary, and so
Mhm.
is the love of neighbor. And I think those two things are kind of two parts of the same hinge. And in the gospel tradition, Jesus, when he espouses the golden rule in Matthew 7:12, and in other places, I always forget those verses, but in Matthew 7:12, he says, "In everything you do unto others as you would have them
Mhm.
do to you. For this is the law and the prophets."
Yeah.
So he's basically saying the entirety of our whole biblical canon, the one that he had as a Jewish man in ancient Near East, can be summed up in this one sentence. And the for everything part is the part that I think trips up a lot of Christian adherents. And
Right?
I grew up fundamentalist, so I know where they're coming from. So permaculture is revolutionary. It seeks to build community. It seeks to regenerate agricultural systems, and it also seeks to improve degraded land through biological remediation techniques that can clean the soil, rebuild the soil, and put it into productive use for not only for human beings, but for all of the other flora and fauna that we absolutely have to support, because we're in the middle of another mass extinction event, and a lot of that's caused by human activity. And we can't look at the Bible that says the creation is good and then have the same idea, the idea that my ex-wife told me, that it doesn't matter what we do to this planet, God's going to make us a new one, which is a
That
profound
kills me.
illogical take,
Love
right?
that.
But that is just,
Sorry.
it's mind-boggling that any person would say that and mean it. But this person, is a Southern Baptist, and
Well, I've been saying for a while that we have acted like spoiled children, destroying all of our toys and then asking for more.
yeah, exactly.
We supposedly have this amazing planet that we've been blessed by, and we are constantly destroying it. We are constantly saying it's not good enough. My will is mightier than that. I want this to happen. And it's so disrespectful to God's creation, and the fact that it's coming from Christians makes me go insane. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's just so antithetical to the beauty of creation, and it's completely ego driven. I grew up in the Bay Area of California, which is basically a concrete jungle.
Mm-hmm.
Being in LA and seeing all of the natural flora and fauna and I mean, they have really done it right. I go over a mountain occasionally and I smell nothing but roses. I mean, they are really trying to do this, and I had no idea. But when I think back when I had my homes, I never once sat on the front lawn. I spent the majority of my weekends dealing with the sprinkler systems busting because my son ran over a sprinkler, or I can't even tell you how much time I wasted on that friggin' lawn.
Right.
Never used it, never sat on it, just continually fought the bugs, the everything that was going on. And had I known about this, I would have done things totally different. I would have had a yard like I see here, something that doesn't require all of the maintenance, all of the pesticides, all of the effort, and just grows naturally in the conditions that it's supposed to.
Yeah. But well, the reason that all those inputs are required is because that is chaos. I look at a lawn as chaos because
Totally.
you're forcing something into creation that does not exist in nature. You do not have monocrops existing anywhere in the natural world.
No.
But Scott's and, you know, True Green Kimlawn
Yeah.
and all of those kinds of companies want us to buy their products, and they sell us on the idea that this pristine lawn should be the thing. And when I was researching the chapter that I have on home and yard maintenance in the book, Go Golden, I learned that that NASA had somehow in their magical computerized wizardry figured out that there were about as much lawn in the United States as would cover the entire state of Texas.
Wow.
Texas is big, y'all. That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
And it's fucking enormous. So
right? I've driven through it 3 times.
Yeah. What if we just put 25 to 50% of that lawn into organic food production? Well, that changes a whole lot.
Okay,
in terms of local
so let me
food.
stop you there because I struggle with that. I mean, there's a big thing going on around the internet, which I fully bought into until I owned a home and had fruit trees. And fruit trees result in rats. So how do we overcome that situation just off the top? Like, I mean, when I first moved here, I was going through lawn withdrawal. Like, oh my God, I just want a place with a yard. And then I realized after being here a while, like, okay, no, this is so much better. But putting fruit trees in, putting vegetable gardens out in your front yard, you're going to draw in all of the animals that we don't want around us anymore. How do you combat that?
Okay, so there's a permaculture guy named Jeff Lawton in Australia. He was one of Mollison's original students, and he has a joke that he says, "You don't have a slug problem; you have a lack of ducks problem."
I've heard that. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if you've got rats and there are too many of them, then you don't have enough. You haven't attracted the right predators, or you haven't got enough cats around to lower the rat population.
And I once had a rat that walked right between my cat and my dog, licked its paws, and then continued to walk through.
Rats are smart. Rats are smart. And that would be a vector that, like I was talking about before, that kind of thing, rodents would be a vector that you want to take care of.
Yeah.
But a good designer would design with that in mind.
Okay.
And you're probably not going to get rid of all of the rats.
Of course.
Right, because there's just so fucking many of them, and they tend to be very fecund. They procreate like rabbits.
They're tenacious.
Yeah, so that would be one thing. But one of the ideas behind permaculture is that because we are in a time of rapidly advancing climate change caused by human beings, and anybody that has trouble wrapping their head around that can follow Dr. Michael E. Mann on Twitter. He's one of the leading climatologists in the world. He's the one behind the hockey stick graph that showed that we were on this trajectory of human-induced climate change, or Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who is also a climate scientist, and I'm pretty sure she's a Christian. So a lot of Christians inexplicably don't believe in climate change because there's this very strong anti-intellectual streak within mainstream American Christianity.
It's all ego. I mean, the thing that kept resonating in my head as you were talking about the permaculture was like, whoa, this means that we're going to have to think. Americans don't like doing that. We're actually going to have to think and plan and try and figure and honor all of our surroundings. Oh yeah, Americans don't do that very well.
No, we certainly do not. And there are three ethics of permaculture, and I espouse them as creation care, neighbor care, and future care. Other people espouse them as earth care, people care, and resource share.
Okay.
And still others say redistribute the surplus, which gets the capitalist kind of feeling antsy because they like to hoard wealth, and permaculture people say no. You should be spreading these resources out.
Community.
Because yes, building community, and a resilient system is one with lots of connectedness. So we'll go back to the lawn or to that field of soybeans. There's no connectedness there between those soybeans or that turf grass and the rest of the system because it's artificial. But a cultivated ecosystem that has lots of different layers and things going on is going to be much more resilient in the face of bad weather and the kinds of things that we're seeing damn near every week on the news in terms of climate change induced weather events.
LA just had a hurricane.
Right. And they probably,
it's that nuts.
I don't know how much rain they get. But I saw a picture of Dodger Stadium that looked like it was in the middle of a lake, and that's not normal.
I got waterfront property, briefly.
Yeah. So
but I mean, I hate to sound like such a downer, but if we've lost our sense of community between each other, how are we going to do it with our cities, with our landscaping as a world? How would we, I mean, you truly have to love your neighbor to care if they're drinking pesticides. You have to care about your grandchildren's life instead of denying science change. I mean, all of this seems like beyond our comprehension at this point. How do you suppose that we overcome all that?
Well, one of the things, and it's difficult because we live in the United States, and since our inception as a national idea, from the colonial invasion era all the way to now, we've been a hyper individualized society. Dickens wrote a novel in the 1840s. Which one was it? Was it Martin Chuzzlewit? And he lampooned that aspect of Americans, and also gun violence, and also hypocrisy around the enslavement of African peoples in the 1840s. So we're still that country. So one of those things is to build interpersonal relationships, and also find places where communities already existent. And for some people that could be a church or a synagogue or a temple or a book club, but we have to, and this is really difficult. I have PTSD, so isolation is a pretty comfortable place for me to be because of trauma.
Yeah.
But I have to work hard to make connections with people that I don't know. But one of the things that's really powerful is just learning what
Lola.
permaculture is.
Yeah.
And I took my first permaculture design course in 2007, and it blew my damn mind. It also scared me witless for a while, but it showed me that there is a path forward despite all of the challenges that we face. And there's a joke that a lot of times when somebody learns permaculture, they become like the golden retriever that has just jumped out of the swimming pool and run into the living room to let everybody know exactly how happy it is by shaking the water off, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I find is really important, because there's so much common sense in what permaculture design as a system teaches. Mm-hmm. Then there's the spiritual common sense of, if you don't want people doing that shit to you, don't do it to them.
Right?
Right. So if you start to build bridges, then things start to fall into place. And part of the problem is that we're so inured into capitalistic grasping and consumption and not talking to our neighbors because we're going home, because we're tired. Capitalism is exhausting. The news was exhausting. Christo-fascism and fascist attempted coups are exhausting. And apathy is a very real millstone that a lot of Americans carry around. So those are all huge challenges. I am absolutely not minimizing them in any way. And they're things that I personally deal with, which is why I write about the kind of things that I write about. And and I have a pretty limited audience. I wish I could, do this in the way that Joel Osteen does with his grift that he's got going. Reach that kind of number of people with, of course, this message of permaculture design. And I mean, if I could just get people to grow their own fucking vegetables, I would start to feel a little happier.
It's a lot of work,
though. Farmers to start growing in conjunction with nature instead of dumping Roundup all over
but you cannot live in a capitalistic society that demands you have all of these things and have time to grow your vegetables. I have been so ambitious with so many gardens that get so out of control because I had a few busy weeks. But I think, and I've walked out there going, oh my God, rotten tomatoes, and I had so many, all of these wonderful ideas and aspirations. And I just didn't have the time because I had to work 60 hours a week, because I had to do all of these things. But as you're talking, I, again, am seeing things down the line. And I think of, and I cannot remember her name right now, but she is an autistic woman who had she's the one with the cows, and she
Temple
made.
Grandin.
Say it again.
Temple Grandin.
Yes, great. Yes, yes. I mean, and just rerouting the ways that the cows went to slaughter, or the way, changed everything for them.
Yes.
So down the line, if we start with something as simple as our yards and then move into healthier foods. That's why I brought up Costa Rica. They don't use any of that stuff. Most of the country is designated a natural spot that cannot be, I'm losing my words. But anyway, PETA, all of the things that are organizations that are going out there right now wouldn't have as much to fight if we just honored everything on our planet. If we just said, this is what your purpose is, this is what my purpose is, and stop being a virus. It goes all the way down the line. Health, wealth, subsistence, individuality could not exist anymore because you need the other people. I had no idea that permaculture was so intertwined in so many different aspects of our lives, or could be anyway, if we actually implemented it. in any way.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is, like I said, it's a systems thinking design science. So it takes a very broad view and tries to see the interconnections between a lot of different things. And one of the really humbling
How
things,
pagan of you.
well, yeah, I mean, it shows that you have to be connected to nature, right?
Yeah.
To observe and interact, or as Thich Nhat Hanh says, don't just do something, sit there. Like you were saying earlier, Americans have to stop and think. Well, as a designer, we have to stop and think, and sometimes, you know, we make mistakes. I made some design mistakes in my yard. We just had a big storm roll through the other day, and a bunch of my Jerusalem artichoke plants got knocked over because I planted too many of them. I think I planted them a little too shallow, and they proliferate like mad season after season. They also create an edible tuber and a flower that pollinators like. So it's a stacking functions kind of plant. But I didn't design it well, and now I've got 7-foot tall Jerusalem artichokes laying down all over my yard. But it creates connection when you start to think in this way. When you start to see that cooperation rather than competition is how nature works.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Even amongst predators, there's an idea that there is a level of cooperation between the predator and the prey.
Yeah.
On some energetic level. And, you know, you mentioned PETA. I write about combined animal feeding operations in the book because that is a completely horrific way to do agriculture. It is, and Temple Grandin is mentioned in that chapter because of her work on slaughterhouses.
Yeah.
These kinds of things, as you said, they bring awareness, but they also bring change. So the least change for the greatest effect in that example with Dr. Grandin is that the animals are less stressed, and at the last moments of their life, you know, they're not as stressed, and therefore the quality of the meat is better, and the quality of their existence is better. In a combined animal feeding operation, animals do not have a quality existence, and that's where PETA gets it right.
Yeah.
If they start insisting that everybody be vegan, well, that makes absolutely no bloody sense because
no, everything kills to eat.
Right. And
everything.
And if you eat food of any kind, something died.
Exactly.
And sometimes furry things with eyeballs and tails and cute things die. Because if you're going to have your tofu or your tempeh or whatever, I guarantee you that a bunch of rodents died during the process of that combine going through the field.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And to say nothing of the billions of microorganisms and all kinds of things like that die so that we can eat. We're part of nature. We have canine teeth. And if we
everything, I mean, literally, there's nothing on this planet that doesn't kill something to eat.
Exactly. So, you know, I don't, and veganism is completely unnatural because we did not evolve to
each their own, but you know, right. Don't be that golden retriever vegan.
Right. Exactly. You know, don't hate on me because I'm eating locally produced eggs and honey or milk or meat or whatever, because that's what works for my body. The Dalai Lama eats meat every other day and says he's a vegetarian for 6 months and a meat eater for 6 months.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, in researching, I have a chapter in my book on animals and researching all of that and figuring out all of that. It did help me. It changed my prayer before meals of thank you, God, to thank you for giving your life for my meal, to the actual being that died. It also stopped me from being so careless. I used to eat red meat 5 times a week, if not 7. in realizing that I need to honor the cows, I need to be honorable to anything I eat, I cut that back just naturally. I don't know that I would ever give up my steaks and ribs and all of that because I am such a carnivore. But again, if you look at it as an aspect of respect and that something literally gave their lives to give you nourishment, I think the prayer does change. I think it changes from, God gave us this meal or whatever, to a life was given so that I can have nourishment right now. Thank you for that. Like the American Indians did for thousands of years before we got here.
Yeah, I will often say thank you to all the beings who made this meal possible.
Oh, I like that.
Because there are
Yeah.
human beings and there are microscopic beings.
That's all inclusive.
So and that's how permaculture has shifted my thinking in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's a more holistic way of viewing things, and permaculture is very much about holistically interacting with nature. Observe and interact with nature is the first principle. We have a hard time with that in the United States because, well, so much of our natural world is fragmented for a start, and because people are working 40 to 90 hours a week depending on their livelihoods, and there just isn't time, which I'm pretty ardently anti-capitalist as a result of my permaculture studies and my studies of history and theology, and I don't know what the answer is to dismantling that particular monolithic system, but as Ursula Le Guin said, people who were living under feudalism also didn't see that one collapsing.
There you go. I was actually talking to someone today, and he totally switched up the way I think of our individualism by saying it started with our independence. And as soon as we took our independence from Europe, we also implemented it individually, giving us the individualistic, which is attached to the capitalism, and it's just a nasty brew. I mean, it's really a nasty brew to have those mix up and then add the guns to it. We're screwed.
Oh my God.
We're screwed. Yeah. I mean, it's, the lack of community, the lack of, it takes a tribe to raise a child.
It takes a village. Yeah.
It takes a village. There you go. We've forgotten all of that. And the irony is that that's what Christ's message was unity, was compassion, was community. And these Christians are fighting it 100%, which just kind of blows my mind. But we are almost out of time, I fear, and I want to get right. I want to get to your most recently released book, Theological Musings. Talk to me about that. What is that? What all of this is tied into?
Well, I cannot separate permaculture from theology.
Okay.
But Theological Musings isn't as permaculture specific as Go Golden, but it does inform my theological views. But Theological Musings is a collection of essays that kind of criticizes contemporary American culture through a progressive permaculture and trauma-informed lens.
Interesting. Okay.
I have, as I mentioned, I have complex PTSD. I won the PTSD lottery. I had a pretty shit childhood and got complex PTSD from that. And then I was in the Marine Corps, and I was in a bad accident during a training mission, and I got quote unquote simple PTSD from that. So I have a trauma-informed theology that's more victim-focused, so to speak, than it would be to just blanket forgive people who've hurt us kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it also, you just mentioned guns, and one of the essays in there is called Crimes Against Humanity. And it's about the 3 Supreme Court decisions that took place very rat-a-tat-tat, I think, last year when Roe was overturned. And then there was something about guns, the Supreme Court not putting in a ban on assault weapons, and then an EPA decision that Joe Manchin was behind, where the EPA was being suing West Virginia. So, I bring in anti-racism in history because that's part of being a permaculturist, and part of the golden rule is that you have to be anti-racist. You can't be racist. That is your lens. And because of my previous academic work as an undergrad in history, I bring in historical facts and historical research. And one of the things that I learned is that the Second Amendment is rooted in white supremacy.
Oh, totally.
So
totally.
A lot of people don't realize that. But I mean, white supremacy is baked into everything in our Constitution pretty much. And so there's that kind of social critique through a theological lens in theological musings. And I'm very ardently pro rainbow family, as I call the LGBTQIA community, because I grew up fundamentalist and I was taught to hate gay people in the early 90s at New Wanu Baptist Church in Honolulu, where my then wife was on staff and I was in the Marine Corps, and that's where we went to church. So I've had to flip all of that on its head, and I use biblical studies because I'm a seminary graduate, and I was very lucky to study that particular issue with a biblical scholar named Dr. Julia O'Brien, who she's the kind of biblical scholar that if you pick up a New Oxford Annotated Bible, she's all up in that thing.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. And if you pick up the Oxford Encyclopedia of Bible and Gender, she's the editor of that thing.
Nice.
So we studied the Clobber passages, all 7 of them, and put them in their original context and in their original languages, and found out that none of them says that being gay is a sin.
No.
So
it's temple prostitution. It's so twisted.
Yeah, it's very twisted. So I write about those kind of things. There was something called the Nashville Statement that was put out in 2017, very gender essentialist, complementarian, and also that being gay or trans is a choice. So I refute all of that in one of the essays using
good job
biblical studies and the permaculture lens to do that. And I know I'm not going to change everybody's mind, but I remember in 1992 when I was going through the Gay Agenda Week at New Wanu Baptist Church, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it was all that which comes out of the north end of a southbound horse.
Yeah.
Horse shit. So maybe somebody will read that essay and have a rethink about their relationship to the LGBTQIA community and how to love your neighbors. I hate the fact that there's an expression that there's no hate like Christian love.
Right?
And, love the sinner and hate the sin. It's terrible theology.
It's horrible.
That's not how it works in the Gospels.
It's an abusive and destructive love. It's not love in any reality in any way. It's conditional. It's construction. I mean, it's just fully crap.
Yeah. And one of the other things that in all of my work that I strive to show is that it's not just about the afterlife. Jesus was not just about the afterlife. So one day I was on Twitter and I saw that Jordan Peterson had quote tweeted the Pope, because the Pope had said that social justice was a Christian issue or something along those lines. And Jordan Peterson, who's a fuckwit, said Christianity, individual salvation is what Christianity is all about. Social justice is not a Christian concern. So I wrote an essay in Theological Musings to point by point refute that nonsense, and showed Peterson and all his acolytes all of the different places in both the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament where social justice is front and fucking center,
Totally.
including in Jesus's ministry.
Completely. Yeah.
He didn't say
Like Jesus is a white AR-15 gun-toting conservative.
I mean,
yeah. Okay, so I
like
have
Jesus.
yeah. I don't like that Jesus at all.
No.
I like the one of the Gospels much better.
Yes.
Through all of this conversation, I have another question for you. And LA has a huge dichotomy. There's the uber rich, and I joke that the only affordable housing are the tents on the street.
Right.
But one of the biggest things that I see is in the predominantly Black areas, it's a concrete jungle. Almost no trees, no lawns. Truly a concrete jungle. And then you go over to Beverly Hills and it's beautiful landscaping. There's roses everywhere. There are lawns. There are parks. Is permaculture inherently racist?
No.
Because I mean, would it ever get to the marginalized people? Would they even have that type of privilege to enact such a thing?
Pandora Thomas is an African-American woman permaculturist in California.
Okay.
And she works with people who are re-entering, I think that's Pandora Thomas. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but re-entering society from after being adjudicated and incarcerated.
Okay.
And teaches them permaculture and regenerative agriculture and skills that they can hopefully go and get a job with. There's a fantastic movie called Inhabit, a permaculture perspective, that does show that there are people of color doing permaculture in different parts of the country. If it's not available to the poor, it's not revolutionary. And permaculture is revolutionary.
Mic drop there. Yes, love it. Yeah. Okay.
But
I like that.
We could do better about getting permaculture to communities of color. Absolutely.
Well, and they would benefit more than most of the white people would anyway.
Well, again, it's about building connections and not staying in our own little white, cis, heteronormative bubbles or whatever. It's like Bell Hooks said, practice intentional diversity.
Yes.
And who you interact with and the kind of media and literature and art that you take in.
Well, and TJ, this is your comment. We have to earn it. We have to earn it. I get that.
Absolutely.
I get that.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been pondering on having a show of how we do earn that, probably the beginning of October. But yes. Okay, so back up to theological musings.
Yes.
What would be the one thing that you really got out of this book and writing it?
Wow, that's an interesting question I hadn't really thought about. I mean, writing is kind of, I went to seminary thinking I might become a pastor, but it was pretty clear that was not my calling.
Yeah.
And writing was my calling. So one of the things that I got out of writing it was not working on the memoir of how I got PTSD and where I find grace in my life. That's a hard book to write.
Yeah.
So this took my mind off of that. But it also allowed me to do some research into topics that I wanted to learn more about, and also to kind of expand what it means to be a theologian that presents publicly, that takes theology out of the classroom or the pulpit and to the streets, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that.
That's one of the important things that I got from it. And some of the other things are when readers comment on my work and tell me that in some way it has shifted their thinking, or as one person said, your book literally changed my life.
Nice.
I'm just
That's
like,
awesome.
okay, that's why I do this,
Yeah.
because I think these are important things to say. And I think that building community and expanding love of neighbor and the golden rule, which infuses all my work, is truly important in our cultural moment.
Yeah, and across the board. Like I said, when I open the show, I love anything that makes me learn how to be a better human on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
and less individualistic and more community driven. I never thought that permaculture would be such an integral part of that, but it really is.
Yeah, I think
As
so.
well as all your theological musings on all of the stuff that we need to unlearn.
Absolutely.
Well, Dylan, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I want to give you some promotions. Let's see here. Those are his 2 books, everybody. They are found. Oops, let's move that out of the way. They are found on Amazon. Here are. Here is Dylan's website. Look at, I got all of these things messing up my screen share. So we've got Theological Musings that just released August 11th, and the Go Golden, Applying Universal Religious Teaching and Ethics of Permaculture to Create a Sustainable and Just Happier Society. Here is the, let's see here, I need a producer. There's the name of his most recent book. And there is the one for the permaculture that we discussed. So, Dylan, thank you so much. You have totally educated me and hopefully the rest of our audience also. What are your final words and where can people find you?
Just remember that the golden rule is found in all of the earth's wisdom traditions. And that tells me that whatever God is wants us to do that, to live out the golden rule.
Yeah.
And you can find me on X, Dylan Neighbor Cruz, or Spoutable. I think that's the same.
Spoutable? I don't know that one. I can't add another platform.
It's similar to what Twitter used to be.
Okay.
But without all the Nazis.
So like Threads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's an alternative to Twitter.
Okay.
And I'm also on Facebook, and I have an author page and a personal page. So just put in Dylan Neighbor Cruz and you'll find me.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so very much. It's been a fantastic show. I'm going to send you backstage and close the show. I'll see you in a minute.
Thanks.
What another great show. I love learning things and expanding my mind and trying to figure out how to be more loving in this chaotic world that we live in. If you like the show, share it, subscribe. Thank you all so very much. Next week's show is a follow-up to our Righteous Anger show that we had a few months back. We're going to be talking with some amazing guys about how to use our anger constructively and for justice. It's going to be another great one. Have a wonderful week, and don't forget, walk in love. Mwah! See you soon.